Hey everyone, and welcome to another Soapbox edition of the Risky Business Podcast. My name's Patrick Gray. These Soapbox editions of the show are wholly sponsored, and that means everyone you hear in one of them paid to be here. And today we're speaking with the Chief Executive of Island, which is a company that makes an enterprise browser. Now, they've appeared on the show a bunch of times before, and we've spoken about the general shape and gist of the product, but there's a bunch of benefits, right? So this is an enterprise browser with a full enterprise feature set, unlike the consumer browsers or the consumer-based browsers that most enterprises are using. But, you use Island, you get some benefits like you can do endpoint health checking, you can do secure app delivery, pegged to that browser, you can do DLP stuff, you can do cut and paste restrictions that are quite granular. So you can cut and paste between these apps, but you can't cut from this or copy from this app and paste it outside. And there's file system restrictions and just really, really cool stuff and granular controls. But something that's happening with them lately, which I find really interesting, is increasingly people are buying them to tick off various compliance objectives and not just cybersecurity objectives. In this interview, you're going to hear Michael talk about how people are able to comply with labor regulations by using an enterprise browser, which I know technically isn't a cybersecurity thing, but I just found it so interesting that I kind of zeroed in on this part of the conversation in the edit. So here is Michael Fay to kick things off now about how companies are ticking off compliance requirements with the Island Enterprise browser. Enjoy.
We can literally show you every click, every type at any given moment in any given policy structure. So what does that really mean? You are an IT worker. We don't care about 90% of what you do from a compliance perspective, but you just logged into Amazon and you're setting up new users. I can literally track everything you do in that process. And I can send that to the SIM or your S3 bucket or wherever else you need that. So I can grab data at a very intricate level, opposed to having to do it every application. So you could do things like PAM. You can literally put, privileged account management on an app that a CyberArk doesn't even know exists. You literally could give that control in place. I can make it so an end user at a call center, if they want to access something, they got to put in a reason. They have to, I'm about to go look at your last purchases. Wait a second, we shouldn't have to do that. Well, in this case, I do. Here's what I have to do from a compliance perspective to be allowed to do that. I put in the reason, I attach the ticket. It's now recording everything I do in there. And then I step off and the end user gets a warning. This is all being recorded. So it keeps them inside the bounds of that. Also, we get a lot of compliance around data flow. How do we ensure that this data can't be seen, this data can't be taken, this data can't be accessed? We can govern all of that. Who can get to what from where and what geography they could get there. And, are my people in Germany getting to the German sales force, or are they being redirected to the U.S. sales force? When they fly into the U.S., which sales force do they connect to? We can manage all of those elements. And it's just extreme visibility as needed. And
how do you manage that though? Sorry, because that's an interesting one that I wouldn't have, that's a use case for GDPR purposes that I wouldn't have thought was immediately obvious, which is I am a German person working for an insurance company or whatever. I go to the United States for a conference and then just via their CDN or whatever, the way that they distribute resources, I'm winding up kind of logging into the wrong portal. How do you actually enforce that in the browser when a lot of this is done via the sort of content distribution networks for those apps? Because that's going to be tricky.
So we have tenant control to start with. The trickiness you speak of, which I've dealt with bunch of my career, was based in the networking aspect of it. If we want to force to a connection back to a given location, we have the ability to do that with policy very easily. So where it really shows up is, which G Suite am I going to? I'm a strong organization. I want to bring in G Suite. Am I going to your personal G Suite or my corporate G Suite? Those are very different tenants to us. The German Salesforce is different than the US Salesforce. They are literally fundamentally different links. We can direct that and control that, and the end user never has to understand that. And we can also then control what data they see.
So hang on, that's by domain, is it?
It can be. It can be by domain. Right. We can do it direct IP addresses. It can be URL, but we also have network control. We literally have the ability to do a ZTNA connection and take them back to their data center if we want. or take them back to, source IP address.
So is that via like some sort of what we would call like an identity aware proxy sort of thing, and you peg certain URLs to those proxies? That makes sense.
Yeah. But I will tell you, it's shocking how little you actually have to use the proxy chaining when you have actual control of the real URL.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
so,
I just wondered, because I would have thought, though, when I was talking about CDNs, it's obviously because you're going to get different, you're going to get different IPs back for google.com in Australia than you're going to get in Germany and whatever. So I just wondered if you were sort of pegging DNS results, to country of origin, or how that all worked.
Yeah. So most of the companies that really care about this, they actually have a set of of privileged IPs they use that you call back to.
Okay.
So like they don't really go directly to Salesforce. They go to a set of IPs and then there. So we can do that, but we also have our own thing that sits inside the DMZ, and we can call that to get access back to data centers.
And I'm guessing what you're saying is that if a user just tries to enter like salesforce.com or whatever, it just redirects them, or
it
handles
it for the user.
So that's pretty simple. Like it's just redirecting them to the customer's domain for.
But let's
Salesforce
get a little trickier. So now you're dealing with a French organization, and yes, you have the geo, but they can't work past 4:30. How do I govern that? And any interactions, we can't record what they do. We can only record their violations. But when you go over to the UK, we can record everything they do, and they can run all day long, and they're in the same, Amazon bucket. How do you set policies for these different flavors? We give you really strong dexterity on that, where even inside your own company, your own geography, you can pick and choose how all this stuff works, opposed to a one-size-fits-all model. Identity-based policy is really hard to do at the network layer. Really hard.
It is.
We can do it at the endpoint and really change the way that works. So you can.
Well, it's hard to do in the IDP layer as well, right? Because you're sort of issued with tokens that grant you access. But my mind is boggling a little, because you just said French people can't work past 4:30. What's that?
So we actually have a French customer that their edict is their access to their applications has to shut down at that, because there's a governance on the hours of work that they allow their employees to do. And they literally stop the ability to access their applications at a certain time of day.
Why do they do that?
According to them, it's a government regulation for them of how many hours they can have in a work week.
Are they in a sort of specialized, ultra-regulated industry, or is this just like, are you telling me that French people can't work past 4:30? Because that'd be pretty cool,
Not all. Well, hey, listen, there's obviously French people do that, but the French have a governed hours of work in a week. And you don't take a salaried employee and have them work 80 hours like we do in the US and just say that you're salaried. It is what it is. And they often have to prove that can't occur. Now, I'll tell you, we have this in the US too, in a different way. We have a wonderful customer that is trying to do really right by their employees. They're a fast food restaurant, or maybe they think of themselves as not fast food, or fine food or whatever it is. And their workers can go out on their portal and look at the other stores and take hours at those other stores if they want to complete, they want more hours, right? They don't have to just get the hours at their local store. And they did this to try to make sure their workers could get to full time as fast as possible, going everywhere they want. If they spend more than 10 minutes doing that, you have to pay them for the full hour in California.
Yeah.
So here they were trying to be nice, and then they hit this roadblock that says, if you spend, a while clicking around here, we have this problem. We govern that relationship.
Yeah, so you kick them out at 9 minutes and 45 seconds or whatever. Yeah.
Exactly. And that's something that company needed. Will they need it next year? Policies will change. Maybe that goes across use. Maybe it goes away, and they want that dexterity. A number of bizarre rules that end up in this is amazing. I'll give you another one. We got traders and investment teams that can't view LinkedIn because LinkedIn has messaging. And it's not audited and it's not tracked, so they can't. So imagine you're investing people's money and you can't go out on LinkedIn and see who quit from that company that day, which would be a telltale sign of what's going on, where executives move and where they go. So what are they doing? Well, we all know they're going to see it. They are taking the risk of having that interaction on their own device outside of the jurisdiction of the SEC and everything else. They have to be. They're not saying dumb to that information. We make it so they can go to LinkedIn, but we record that. If they do happen to have a chat, we can record that messaging, or we can block the messaging in the first place, something you can never do at the network layer, figuring out which stream that is. that actually has been used a lot. We've had others that want to do Zooms and they want to make sure no one can do screen captures on the Zoom. Nobody can upload a document or download a document or put something in the chat. And that last mile control shows up in so many ways that aren't cyber. It's amazing what can be done with that.
Yeah, I mean, you're actually really selling it on the compliance stuff because, just those use cases that you're talking about in finance, I mean, eventually, that can pop up in investigations, right? Like you're being investigated by the government. There's a few screen recordings lying around, that's not good. They shouldn't have been taken in the first place, and they can incriminate people. And even if they're not incriminating, they shouldn't have been taken in the first place and like incorrectly stored and all of that, right? So,
Patrick, one of the things we added on because of a customer built it and we made it part of our product after we saw it, they put a QR code in watermark, and the QR code would say what machine, what user, what was going on when that QR code showed up. So if you pull out your phone and you try to take a picture of your screen and they find it on the dark web or whatever, they know everything about the leakage.
Yeah, it's like a printer marking, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then there's the other watermark that just has your name and your phone number and all that stuff on it. So you take a picture of it, you better be really good with Photoshop because, you're going to be outing yourself when you share that.
Yeah, that's interesting. So, I mean, in terms of like the industries where this sort of compliance stuff lights people up, right? Because I can imagine that's how the conversation goes. Like, the case you just laid out for, like trading houses and whatever, that is, I can imagine that that's a pretty easy sell. Are there other industries where it's as much of a slam dunk?
Yeah. So healthcare.
Yeah.
As they're struggling with teledoc and everything around that. And I didn't know this when I first started working with them. Almost every doctor's a contractor. So you have this.
Yeah, they all run. I mean, it's the same here, right? They all run like a company, basically, in Australia, or a trust, and that's how they work.
So you have this arm's length transaction with a doctor, but they have all of your, all your patients' data. So you're the one with the risk as the company, and you need to give them access. And the interesting thing about that problem, if you make it too hard, to work with another hospital. So if you require too much stuff on them, they're in such demand, they just won't work with you. They'll work with another set of providers and this and that. So you want to make it easy, but you have to obviously defend your patients. So there's that, the healthcare world, state and local's got a lot of governance to it. Federal's got governance to it. But I will tell you what's really shocking. Many industries that you don't think of as compliance centric, we get purchased for because they have their one thing they've got to do. They've got this one area that's a burden for them, and they don't want to adopt a massive effort to solve that. So maybe you're a hotel chain and you've got customer data that GDPR cares about, but it sits in one place. If you just govern that one place, you took that entire risk off your back. So they don't have to, if you will, become a bank or become, a PCI juggernaut or anything else. They can solve that one problem. We see that come up a lot. So it's not just these highly regulated that care. And then, of course, they get their security upgrade, and then we get automation, and it becomes one of the many tipping points for kind of crossing that chasm.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Now, look, another thing that's popped up over the last couple of years as an issue is, and you're not the only company that's looking to address this, right, which I find interesting, is the idea of company staff just plugging all sorts of sensitive information into Gen AI chatbots. And I know people who do this, right? Like, I know people who use like ChatGPT as like a coding assistant. Yep. Like even my colleague, Adam Boileau, he just re-engineered and rewrote the back end to our content management system. He's not a developer, and he used Gen AI for suggestions in various places. And he said it was actually quite useful. He said, you don't just take its output and use it, because it's always like, a bit hinky in some ways, but nonetheless, he found it quite useful. Now, that's fine because we're a small business writing a, content management system or whatever. But you do have to worry if you're running, a large, tightly regulated organization about what your staff are slapping into those models, which are then going to use those inputs and those queries to train their data sets. And you don't know how that's going to fall out again when someone else asks it a question. So, I mean, this is the thing. Like, at this point, the risk, I think, is largely theoretical. It's just that we don't know. how that's going to go. So you have had a lot of customers who are quite concerned with controlling the way people are using those sort of services, right?
Yeah, we do. We get a lot of.
And how do you do that? Like, is it granular, or do you just block them from being able to use those services? Because I'm aware of other companies where you can just block it and just say, no, you can't use that. Or is it a case where you're trying to do inspection of these prompts?
Yeah, so the blocking is a terrible approach because the blocking comes with this idea that you understand how AI is going to show up in your world. And that's just not true. Is Salesforce an AI company or not? I don't know. If I watch the commercials, they are. So what do I do there? Do I block?
Everyone's an AI company. Everyone who's publicly listed now is an AI company because they want to make the little line go up.
Exactly. And they're going to have real AI products. And when do you run into them? And is it obvious, right? So the idea that I'll just block AI and, it will allow these two AIs. Okay, good luck. So step one that we provide is that shadow IT. What AI are you actually running into? Which is usually shocking. When we ran in our own company, we ran in about 200 AI engines that we ran into for a 400-person company. And okay, great. So a new shadow IT problem. So what are we even running into? Then we can govern, of course, which ones you can go to, but we also can steer, which I think is very important. If you want to go to one AI engine, let's say some legal engine, but you have another one the company has licensed, prefers, has governance over, we can redirect them at that moment. So not just
like a standalone model that's not going to refeed the training set for everybody. And
exactly. So we can redirect them. We see you're trying to go here. We prefer you to be over here. That's the first step. Then we can apply DLP policies against whatever you do on any of those items. So what are you saying into it? What items are in there? Long term, though, and this is pretty funny, we've got to build an AI engine.
So I was about to say, if you want to be able to do detection on content types that are being fed into prompts, you're going to need to do like a detection that says, is this a block of code? And, do we want to allow that? And the way you're going to do that is with an LLM, right? 100%. So you're actually using AI to inspect prompts to make sure they're okay to put into the AI.
And it's so unique to a company. You can imagine a banker that deals with deals and deal flow and buying and selling companies. What is important to them, and they're the ones I think that are kind of leading this charge of you might learn what we're doing. And if you have a JPMC, for instance, where if they were using AI without abandon, and they don't, they're very governed, you might be able to see where JPMC is investing or what customers they're helping or who's being sold, or, because they're in everything.
Yeah.
That's very scary and can move markets, and tons of SEC violations hidden in there if it ever happened. So in that scenario, mentioning, say, my company could be perfectly fine for American Airlines. Hey, we're talking this island about, a standard travel agreement. Great. But if JPMC, who's one of our bankers, starts talking about what we're doing, that could be, literally, a massive issue. So understanding that risk is going to be company by company. And I think, you're going to need that AI engine to start to understand what is confidential for our company. Every company's different.
Yeah, and I just think that is an interesting thing, like, because a lot of people are using things like ChatGPT as a replacement for search engines. Yeah. So, if you're sitting upstream and you somehow had visibility into the queries coming out of a large bank, which are all of a sudden a lot of people are asking AI chatbots, hey, tell me about Ireland. What do we know about their market share and whatever? Like, that's going to be valuable and sensitive information.
Valuable. And I got to tell you, I use it to create PowerPoints.
Yeah.
And the wrong PowerPoint getting out could be very damaging. So you have to be smart about how you use it, and some governance definitely helps. But I think pointing people to the right models is helpful. Guiding them to it is helpful.
Well, how do you handle that? I mean, I'm guessing you've got a licensed sort of standalone model to do that.
Yeah. So we can embed whatever engines you want and literally make it part of the browser itself. We modify the buttons, click here.
No, I meant you personally when you're doing your PowerPoints. I'm guessing you've got a sort of private license off to some, standalone model, like an Anthropic or something.
Yeah. I don't use the help for anything that would be confidential today.
Yeah. Okay. Right.
So it's self-governed. It's very simple for me, but I will tell you, if you're a software company and you sign the contracts we sign about data residency and where your data can go and the like, it is very hard to operate anything customer related with an AI engine and live inside what you've already agreed to contractually. Now, could you get caught? Probably theoretical, difficult, but Grammarly breaks half of those contracts, right?
Yeah.
Much less. And I think the usage of things like ChatGPT, it is like Grammarly now. Hey, make this sound better. You know, give me a better graphic on this. So the data risk is very, very real long term.
Yeah. It's funny that you say that. I mean, one of the things that I find extremely frustrating actually is having spent a large part of my life actually writing professionally. I find it immensely frustrating that people use these models to sound better because everything that comes out of these models sounds the same and they don't really write well. So it's a pet peeve of mine.
Yeah,
100%.
you are starting to, you can feel it when ChatGPT's on the other side. You get an email and you're like, this is weird. You can feel it when somebody ran it through those engines.
Oh, 100%. Like, when it's AI generated text,
Yeah.
So look, one last thing I wanted to talk to you about, and this is something that's come up previously when I've spoken to Ireland, is you always talk about how, in the case of an M&A, using Ireland lets people work quickly together and whatever, and it's, less of a disaster to start integrating networks and whatever. I wanted to get some more detail on that because I'm not exactly clear what the use case is for. I mean, I'm guessing, okay, if you need to get into someone's SAP or whatever, all of a sudden this entire new set of users external needs to get into some of those applications. I'm guessing that's where it's useful. Is that about right? Or is it, or am I missing something there?
No, you're getting it. I think of it this way. If you trust us for BYOD or contractors and you just bought this company and you are a well-run company yourself with good security and good IT enablement, you look at that company you have to integrate and go, okay, I got to go figure out what they have, what their risk is, what issues they've got before I bring them into the tent, right? I'm not going to risk my entire company over this thing we just bought. So they keep it at arm's length. But that company that just got bought wants to sell your products, wants to be able to be on the same email, wants to be able to communicate with you, wants to start to be part of that company. So treating them like a BYOD user or a contractor is a simple way to solve this problem immediately. So you can literally say, all right, you can get to our messaging platform day one, and we're going to inspect that your device is what we think it is, that you're configured correctly, and we're going to give some data controls around that. So you can quickly offer up applications to share. So SAP is a great example. You need to be on my SAP. Great. We can give you access to that, but I don't have to bring your entire company over. I don't have to bring your device into my network. I can still be suspicious of your setup while we collaborate. And that's really what it's about. It's not about a long-term posture. It's about how to get an acceptable short-term posture, why those IT teams figure out how to become one company.
So people spin up Ireland to get the initial access going, and then gradually those networks are joined, and then what? They revert back to often their other browsers?
They don't. That's the beautiful part.
Yeah. Hey, speaking of, right, we've seen Google actually launch their enterprise browser, which looks, it's very different to what you're doing.
Yes.
Any thoughts on what they're up to? I mean, it seems like they're trying to deliver different objectives with theirs.
Yeah, the Google Enterprise Browser has been around before Island, right? And what it really, I think...
But they've kind of relaunched it and zhuzhed it up and added features, right? Yeah.
Yeah, but I think really at the heart of it was there's this massive estate of Chrome browsers at any company. How do I ensure configuration is optimal? How do I ensure that our settings are right? How do I set general policy for this giant estate? Doing that with, a big fix and all these weird controls it was very kludgy and very challenging. And I think Google set up to do that. Then they had their Beyond Court vision, which has been around for, I don't know, a decade and a half or whatever. I can't remember when it showed up, but it seems like it was always there. How do I engage in that Beyond Corp? How do I make sure our traffic can plug into all these other items and open up that integration? And so it's active trying to be a little more collaborative with the enterprise estate opposed to ambivalent to it. These are all positive things. They are minor features of our product, but they are positive for the environment to have those. So it's not that they're bad ideas or not needed. You could just do a lot more. There's a lot more.
Yeah. I mean, that was the impression I got as well when I looked at it, which is, okay, they're sort of dragging these things kicking and screaming into a more modern age when it comes to configuration management and whatnot. But they're not offering...
It is blanket configuration, like turn off, copy, paste.
Yeah.
So we did this little game for our company to understand the value of having dexterity on a copy paste. So like for us, we can control copy paste and not only what you can copy, what you paste, but where it goes. So we could say these 7 applications can share data. You can copy and paste between them at will. If you have blanket copy and paste, you're going to turn it off. That even applies to the app you're in. So imagine working in Salesforce or something where you can't copy and paste, and you can't go and get your contact and put it in your email and all this other stuff. So for a couple of hours, we did that. And the plan was to have it, we turned our policy to mimic that. We planned to do it for half the day. We made it about 90 minutes before the team just literally just, destroyed us and made us turn it off because they couldn't work. They couldn't function.
Yeah.
And that's what happens with these blind policy updates. The reality is it is nice to get a common configuration across the environment right up until somebody says, but what about me? And it has to be different. And now you're outside of that control, and now you're yet another variant. And so it's a step in the right direction, but the dexterity isn't there to really be used by enterprises at large. And that's why you don't see it around too much.
All right, well, Michael Fay, we're going to wrap it up there. Thank you so much for joining us for this, the last Soapbox edition of 2024. Have a great Christmas and a great New Year's, and we'll chat to you again next year.
Thank you very much.
That was Michael Fay there from Ireland. Big thanks to him for that. And that is it for this edition of the Soapbox podcast. I do hope you enjoyed it. You can find Ireland at island.io. If you want to go and get some more information and maybe take the browser out for a bit of a spin. But yeah, that's it for this podcast edition. I do hope you enjoyed it. Until next time, I've been Patrick Gray. Thanks for listening.